So I'd like to welcome you all to Immigrants and the Public Imagination. This plenary is a collaboration between NIC, Culture Strike, and Arts in a Changing America. My name is Roberta Uno, and I'm a theater director and also the director of Arts in a Changing America, based at California Institute of the Arts. I want to thank all of the organizers. I think it's incredible that we have such an amazing arts and culture presence, arts, culture, and media presence at this conference, an entire track and an artist caucus. But I especially want to thank Tanu Yakupitiage and also Fabiana Rodriguez and Sonia Guinan-Saka from Culture Strike for their incredible work as artists and activists in bringing and planning this artist track at NIC. I'm going to start with a short clip from Art Change US. We're going to show some videos, so if I can show that now. It's a new 5-year national initiative that seeks to explore and understand the demographic impact on arts and culture in the United States. Changing demographics force us to reconsider terms like underrepresented. Underrepresented to whom?
The concept of who gets to create the future has to change along with the numbers of who's here.
Diversity is not the end in itself. It's the means for attaining equity.
The kind of sociopolitical relations that will be impacted by demographic change demand institutional transformations.
We cannot in America afford for the arts to be monochromatic, or just one note, one narrative, one story, or one kind of dance.
How do we work along a spectrum?
You have to make home where you are. You have to respect the community around you.
These engines of change are really, the ones that are really shaping the conversation are emerging from outside of the existing professionalized nonprofit landscape.
What happens to our lexicon and our ways of thinking when what we have always accepted as the mainstream is just one of many rivers?
Given where the mainstream media is, given where our politics are, given where the conversation is, I cannot think of a more important time and a more critical time for this to happen. What is that great quote from Baldwin? Artists are here to disrupt the peace. So let us do that.
So at Art Change US, we do our own national convenings, and we also partner with programs like today. Our goal for this plenary is to look beyond policy and to look beyond immigration, integration issues, to encourage the participants here to consider how the work they do as immigrants and or with immigrant communities is impacted in a broader context that includes arts, culture, and media. We tend to work in very siloed fields, and yet the reality is that culture, media, and the arts really inform us all and create a public imagination and also a space to speak out. So we're going to start right now with a clip. We're going to show clips of each of our speakers. And so first, we'll start with Jose Díaz-Balart.
Let me bring in someone who has been on the front lines of the immigration fight. United We Dream National Field Organizer, Greysa Martinez. Greysa, thanks for being with me this morning.
Buenos dias. Thanks for having me.
Buenos dias. On Tuesday, you were arrested outside Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid's office, demanding him keep his word. What more can Senator Reid do at this point? Because it's really in the president's court after the House decided not to act.
Right. So we've seen that Republicans have stalled immigration reform, and we've been asking President Obama and Democrats to come out boldly for our parents, for my mom, Elia Rosas, that is in threat of deportation today. And we decided to do that action in Senator Reid's office because he's been standing silent. The president's decision to delay has been shameful. And my mom, there has been justice has been denied to my mother because of this delay, and I had to do something about it.
I want to bring in the human aspect of this, because it's easy for people that are watching at home to hear you and say it doesn't really make sense. But you were saying, but Gresa, in your case, your father is not with you anymore, right?
No, Jose, my dad was deported 6 years ago. My sister just graduated from college and he wasn't able to see her. And every day I'm scared that my mom is gonna be deported again. And my family just barely made it through, surviving, a deep separation from my father. And I don't know if we can do it again.
And this is why it's important, friends, to listen to these voices, because it's not just about politics, and it's not just about Republicans and Democrats. It's also about families, about kids like the one you're seeing here that can't see her father and that fears being left without a mother. Now, what do you think that could be done to try and let America know why it's a good thing, or it's not, to have immigration reform? Because really, some people say it's about taking jobs that Americans need right now.
So, Jose, you're a multiple award-winning journalist, and you've done so much in Spanish and English to really shift the narrative around immigration. We'd like to really know how you managed to really insert that human element to your stories, and how, looking at this work as a journalist and the whole issue of objectivity, when you feel you can and should really speak out as an advocate.
Well, thank you, and good afternoon to all of you. It's an honor to be here today. Well, thank you, and good afternoon. I live this every single day of my life, and I do it in 2 languages. In the morning, 9 to 11 in the morning, I'm on MSNBC. At 6:30 p.m., I'm on Telemundo Network. And then Sundays and Saturdays on NBC and Telemundo. But every single day, I think, am I doing enough to just let other voices be heard? And I think it comes down to, and something I've tried to do in the English language side of my career, is it's very easy for the media, in any language, but especially in English language, to think of our communities when it's obvious that our communities are involved. And it's almost stereotypically obvious. So, Syrian refugees, let's talk to you. Should we do the Muslim thing? Let's talk to you. Immigration, let's talk to you or you. But I, every single day, think, well, I'm going to do a story on comedians. Well, they're funny Muslims. And let's have you on as a funny person, not as a funny Muslim. And let's have a lawyer who happens to maybe look like you to talk about legal reform of, I don't know, something that's not related to your religion. That's the difficulty I see. And that's what I think of every single day. Because there are funny Muslims and unfunny Muslims. There are funny Christians and unfunny Christians. I've seen a lot of them recently. There are lawyers that happen to be Muslim, Jewish, Latino, and it's about representing who our communities and what this country is when it's not an obvious subject. But then, when it is a subject that touches our medulla, that which is our most personal, important thing in life, then it's important that we have voices that aren't the experts in New York or Washington, D.C., who can come and give a great speech, some with prompter and some without. It's also about the people who every single day live it and who know in their heart and in their soul what it means to talk about issues like this. And that's why that girl whose father and mother were in the one deported and one about to be deported, that to me is as an important interview as any president, senator, or member of Congress. Because those are the people that know and live it. And that's why I have to tell each and every one of you, and I see Frank Sherry, and I see Ben Monterroso, and I see Gustavo Torres, and I see so many friends that I see on a daily basis and speak to. It is upon you to continue to stand up, insist and demand, but also work with those who maybe disagree with us to say, we're not going anywhere. Every month in this country, 53,000 Latinos born in the United States turn 18 years of age. And when candidates say, Latinos are going to vote for me because the ones that can't vote are the illegals, they're not going to vote anyway, let's set them straight.
So we really want to thank you for how you've included those voices from the ground, from organizers on the ground, from artists, etc., but also the way you've used your own voice, because you and Jorge Ramos actually, speaking up to Donald Trump. I mean, Trump snapped this summer when you asked for that apology around how he had besmirched Latinos. So can you talk to us about how you approach keeping our presidential candidates accountable, and also, address this incredible shift that we've had to public incivility and a real discourse of fear prevailing?
Look, Jorge Ramos, the anchor of Univision, is one of my dear friends. I admire him. We've been working in television for 30 plus years. I remind him he looks older than me every single day. For me, it's not about being an activist. It's just about giving people the opportunity to speak. It's not about what I think about or what I care about. It's about giving the opportunity for people of different perspectives, of different thoughts, of different even ideological persuasions to speak. It's not about the television person's opinion. If it were, there are a lot of networks that do that. You can get your opinion reaffirmed in any number of different ways. It shouldn't be the news departments telling you what you want to hear. It should be giving voice to all sides. And there are people here, look, there's Adrián Carrasquillo of BuzzFeed, is a young Latino who is on the forefront, I think, of a new journalism, but with the principles and standards of that which make me very proud. And it's about giving others voices and not putting your opinion in as the important one. Because back to the voices, it's not about me. It's about the voices of the people who every single day live with the realities of what political decisions are taken in Washington, how it affects them.
Thank you, Jose. And we know that you, with your incredible schedule of being on 2 different stations in Spanish and English, have a story you have to go cover.
I do indeed. I'm so sorry.
When you have to bow out, please just
I
know
do.
that
I thank you.
We so appreciated your presence. We're going to move on now. We're going to move on now to show a video by Rinku Sen, the executive director of Race Forward, showing some of the amazing work they did around stopping the Iword campaign.
In 2010, Race Forward, along with partner organizations, led a campaign to eliminate the use of the word illegal when referring to undocumented immigrants. We collected over 10,000 pledges, created a space for immigrants to tell their own stories, led protests, reported on immigration, and demanded change. And as a result, by spring 2013, the Associated Press, USA Today, LA Times, San Francisco Chronicle, and many other news outlets and journalist associations dropped the I word. But why the big fuss over just one word? The word illegal, when describing immigrants, is a racist slur that divides communities and is used to discriminate against people of color who are perceived to be immigrants. And history shows us that racial slurs breed hate against groups of people and can have deadly consequences. Simply put, the word illegal is dehumanizing and is legally inaccurate. Even though the I word seems to be creeping back up these days, many are pushing back by dropping the I word.
The 11 million undocumented immigrants
effort to allow undocumented immigrants.
So I became undocumented.
Undocumented immigrants.
Undocumented immigrants.
Undocumented immigrants.
Undocumented immigrants.
Let's continue to affirm the dignity and humanity of immigrants, because no human being is illegal. Join us and drop the I word. For more information, visit droptheiword.com.
So we're living in a time when changing demographics make a lot of the language that we have accepted, like mainstream or underrepresented, these terms have really become inverted or have been given new meaning. Or we have these kind of oxymoronic terms like majority, minority that kind of don't even make sense. I'm looking at the fact that even in the press now, the need for new language. I don't know if you saw in the Washington Post the article about the lack of black faculty on college campuses. And they talked about HSBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, but also about TWIs, traditionally white institutions. It was the first time I'd seen that in print. Thought it was amazing. So talk to us about why Race Forward engaged with this issue of shifting language, and clearly we've seen some of the impact of that.
The reason that we picked up the Drop the I Word campaign in 2010 to begin with was there were really two reasons. One was that we could see the effect that the word had on our own people, on immigrants, and on people of color. Not just immigrants of color, but other people of color who may not have been immigrants at all. I remember this young man coming up to me after I'd done a book talk on the Accidental American years ago in Portland, Oregon. He'd been circling our talk during it, and at the end he came up to me and in a whisper said, I overheard you talking about immigration and I wanted to ask you this question. And really, in the tiniest whisper, he said, I'm illegal. He whispered it. And he wanted me to tell him if there was anything he could do. He said, do you think I should? He was a dreamer. He'd been brought by his parents to the country when he was 2 years old and got out of high school, wanted to be an architect. He was looking at the art and architecture books during this talk. But now he found he couldn't go to college, he couldn't get a job, he couldn't do anything. And he wanted to know, do you think I should turn myself into the state and beg for mercy? This was in 2008, and I had to tell him, no, I don't think you should do that. I think you should join a group and fight. The thing about language is that it's so often about characterizing our people and what role we play in the national story. The year after we started the Drop the I Word campaign, we released a research report and broke a story about how deported immigrants end up losing their kids permanently and legally through the child welfare system. At the time, we estimated that 5,000 kids are sitting in foster care now because their parents have been deported, not because there has been any kind of abuse or neglect or trouble in the family. So not having papers should not be something that gets your kids taken away from you and made eligible for adoption. But because in part because the I word had been so active and so prevalent, not having papers became a reason to have your kids taken away from you. So in our study, we found judges, for example, who equated being deported with abandonment. They said, this parent is okay, they're not here, they've abandoned the kid. Judges who said, well, this kid is a US citizen, we couldn't possibly send him to the very dangerous third world place where his parents are now living. Judges who said, we can't place this child with another family member because that family member is quote unquote illegal. So these, the language that we use and the decisions that we make individually, family court judges, social workers, police officers, and the decisions we make collectively by passing a piece of policy, those two things are very, very closely related. And when we think about communications strategy at Race Forward, we think about it in three parts. Part one is the frame, your worldview. Part two is the narratives. Those are the stories that illustrate your worldview. And part three is the message, which is the action that you want taken now. And in Drop the I Word, we were trying to change the frame on immigration from purely law and order to a human dignity frame. We were trying to change all the stories that were getting told from being stories of people, quote unquote, breaking the law, including many that were just lies, stories that were just made up, to stories of people being harmed by the racial bias that the word had come to represent, and the action from being only use the I word to use alternatives. And what we learned from that process is that your narratives, your stories might change based on who you're talking to, and your message might change based on what moment of your campaign you're in, but your frame cannot change. Your frame has to stay consistent. You can't use human dignity over here for one group of people and economic benefit over here for another group of people. That our frame is what gives us consistency morally and politically. So if we want to change the narrative, the story that the country is telling about immigrants and immigration, we have to be willing to engage that narrative, actually engage the language, engage the stories. And we're not going to be able to beat, a third of our fellow citizens and residents into submission by just throwing a bunch of data at them. We have to actually think about the language that we're using and think about the stories that we're telling and make sure that those are all coming together in the interest of human rights and racial liberation and racial justice. Thanks.
Thank you for placing that at the intersection of racial justice and immigrant justice. We're going to now look at a clip from Linda Sarsour. She's the executive director of the Arab American Association of New York. So if we can have that clip, please.
My name is Linda Sarsour. I am born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I consider myself to be a feminist, and maybe not the traditional sense of the word feminist, of what people think when they think feminist. My parents instilled in me that I am the voice of the second, third generation of Palestinian Americans. One thing that has come up a lot for me as a Muslim woman is this idea of humility. I have been told numerous occasions, you're too visible, you're too loud, you're too outspoken. I'm not gonna be humble to the point where I'm quiet. The idea behind modesty in Islam is for people to be able to judge me by my character, not by the way that I look. I'm very proud to wear a hijab. I don't think that wearing my hijab takes away from anything that I can do or be. Islam is very clear about the encouragement of the education of women. I mean, there's just so many clear examples of the leadership roles that women have held. When there has been oppressive behavior against Muslim women worldwide, most often that has come from political reasons or even cultural reasons. Oppression of women is absolutely shunned in the Islamic faith. I don't like to go to mosques where men and women are in different floors or if women are in a smaller space. If we're following the footsteps of our prophet never did that. It's not an Islamic principle, like dividers between people praying. Like that just wasn't something that existed in the founding of Islam. When people see me, they think that I'm an anomaly, that there's only one or two or three of me, when in fact there are millions of Muslim women across the world, and particularly here in the United States, who are strong, who are confident, who are educated, and who are making a difference in our society.
Wow, I really love this clip. When I first saw it, I thought it was incredibly unexpected and courageous to counter Islamophobia using your own story and really as a woman, your own body to tell that story. So thank you for the creativity, but the courage also. And I guess I want to ask how you bring in and why you bring in your personal identity and story. And I'm actually, because I'm a theater director and I realize that there's a whole group of people who can't see us, could you stand and talk from the center of the stage? Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, welcome to my hometown of Brooklyn. I'd say that I have a better, much stronger Brooklyn accent than Senator Schumer. I think Tanu from the New York Immigration Coalition wanted to use that clip, and I think it's a very important one. And one of the reasons is I use my identity as a Palestinian woman, as a Muslim, as a parent, as someone that does go get manicures. I'm sorry, I have to do that. It's part of my ritual. But also as a person born and raised in Brooklyn. This is a story, this is my story, and I think what I've been trying to do, and I've worked very hard at this, is that I'm tired of people trying to tell my story.
I have my own voice. I know my story better than anyone else knows my story. And unfortunately, we live in a time right now where this actually does require courage, and that's unfortunate that it requires courage for women like me to stand up and tell our stories. The media, many media outlets have basically set out a frame and buzzwords. This is all psychological, right? You hear terrorism, you want to automatically think, God, if they're talking terrorism, this must be something to do with Muslims. And what we've been trying to do in our community is trying to tell the stories of who Muslims are in America. And the fact that many of us in our community are actually not immigrants and are very indigenous to this nation, including to this right here, Brooklyn. The idea that our faith has been on the shores of this nation since the days of its founding when we forced black Muslim slaves to come to America. That my faith is so deeply rooted in this nation, and that when someone wants to tell me that I need to go back to my country is Brooklyn, New York. The media has been a great opportunity for people like me to go up on national television and not apologize for the very few people that think they're associated with my community and the actions that they make. I use my voice and my voice of courage to push back and say, don't put that on me, just like you don't put other crimes and other acts of terrorism on other people. And that's the kind of message that we've been trying to send on a national level. I'm very proud of this next generation of American Muslims, including my sister here, Nagin, who you'll hear from shortly, who are using courage and truth. And you know what? I always take a risk, sisters and brothers, to be on a national media show and to say, you know what? I'm gonna speak my truth. And the risk is I may never get invited back. But what I found was that I do get invited back again and again and again, because I bring a perspective that is not just of American Muslims, but a new generation of Americans that's saying enough is enough. We're not gonna stand for hate and divisiveness in this country. We're gonna be big and bold and say that immigrants belong here, that this country was built on the backs of immigrants and black people, that we're gonna stand on national television and say Black Lives Matter again and again until Black lives really matter in this country. And we're gonna do that by telling our own personal stories. When I get on national television, I don't say I represent every Muslim in this country, because I don't. There are Muslims that I personally don't agree with, and I don't want to represent them. But I can go on national television and say, I'm from Brooklyn. I'm a New Yorker. I went to public school. I'm a mother. And there's gonna be someone on that other side of that TV is gonna be like, oh, I'm a mom too. I know where she's coming from. Guess what? I went to public school too. Being able to relate to fellow Americans is the way that we've been able to change some of the narrative. But we still got a lot of work to do. Even when the media is doing the right thing, and I'll give you one quick example. When 3 beautiful young college students in Chapel Hill were murdered in a hate crime, it was the first opportunity that we were able to really shine light on the issues impacting American Muslims in the way that we haven't done before. But just a couple of weeks before that, a young black Somali Muslim boy, Abdus Samad Sheikh, was also killed in a very clear hate crime in Kansas City. Silence. It took 3 light-skinned, beautiful Muslims in North Carolina to be killed for someone to start talking about Muslims. So we need to continue to do work in our community to reflect who our community is. My community looks like me. By my community is also indigenous African Americans, African immigrants, Latino immigrants. Our community reflects every racial diversity, every ethnic diversity across the world, and it is our stories and our courage and our boldness that's gonna change the narrative. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Linda, for the way you really linked a lot of our struggles. And I'm going to move on to Nagin, and I know, with your apologies.
I apologize,
no
I have
worries.
to go. I thank you.
We want you to go, cover those stories.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Jose. Yeah, let's shift down. And we're gonna start with the clip from the trailer from The Muslims Are Coming.
Is there a Muslim problem? Look what's happening.
Make no mistake about it, Islam is a violent religion.
Is there a Muslim problem? Look what's happening.
We are dealing with a culture that is in its medieval era.
These are young, angry terrorists who want to kill you, and they want to kill me, and you know it. Stop with the PC crap.
Can I invite you to a stand-up comedy show? It's absolutely free. It's tonight at 8 o'clock. It's called The Muslims Are Coming. There's a bunch of Muslims on stage, but they're hilarious.
Al-Qaeda claims responsibility for things they could have never done. Did you know the eclipse? We did it for Allah.
The goal of the tour is to go out to Middle America using comedy, reaching out to people beyond our community.
And give America this big Muslim hug. Come on, America, bring it in. Yeah. Yeah, that feels good.
People don't notice minorities usually until either one of them has a hit song or does something horrible.
Well, how do you feel about 9/11?
Today is the day. A live Muslim is here to answer your questions.
Why doesn't the Muslim community be more proactive in denouncing terrorism?
Why do I have to prove to you that I'm not dangerous?
If you're constantly trying to prove that you're the model minority, it's exhausting.
Oh, wait, we have unemployment? What about those Muslims? Having trouble creating jobs? What about those fucking Muslims?
I'm standing in the middle of the dance floor, and I see this dude checking me out. And so I did what any good Muslim girl would do, and I allowed him to grind up on me right here.
I would much rather the edgy Muslim who says vagina is the one that we're more associated with than the edgy Muslim who kills people.
The Mormons asked me if I wanted to be a missionary when I turned 19, and I said, look, to an Arab, a mission's a whole different deal.
I don't know, like if Muslims watch this documentary, if they'll consider these comics proper representations of Islam.
I wish I had more support from some subsects of the Muslim community, and I don't.
I wish these folks the best. They may well be setting themselves up to be killed.
Comedy has a huge role to play for saying things that the mainstream media will not say.
Any dummy can enjoy a nice stand-up show.
What a great moment for Muslims. The eyes are upon you now.
You have to appeal to what is un-American about Islamophobia. You have to make an appeal based on American values.
The casing flew back into my cleavage.
Hey, we work with you. We're your neighbors. We're nice. We make pie. We hate gays, but outside of that, we're just nice normies.
So, Negin, your art form, comedy, has been one of the most effective in terms of changing hearts and minds, and actually even where a lot of younger people get their news from. I was in a public space the other day, I always eavesdrop on young people, and they were talking about they were arguing about, are you Team Michael or are you Team Raphael? And those of you who watched Jane the Virgin will know what that means. All right, but what I was thinking about is that these young people are also getting this through this sitcom, this incredible narrative of the grandmother who is undocumented, and as a strong woman, the silencing that goes on and the choices she makes. And as we all know, the author Jeff Chang talks about how culture shifts often before policy shifts. So I'd love to hear you talk about this film in particular, the genesis of this project, and how it's being received.
Yeah, hi everybody. So, first of all, I'm Team Raphael, and thank you. I know it was like really brave position for me to take. And also, this whole event is really ridiculous because this is the kind of event that like 31 GOP governors would say, not in my state. So we're basically those people now. So the Muslims Are Coming. It came out it's available on Netflix. It came out in 2014 on Netflix, in early 2014, which means our contract is running out in a couple of months. And I'll tell you that Netflix is not quite interested in renewing our contract. So first I have to say to you guys that it's really important for us to vote with our Netflix dollars, and to put the movie on repeat just in the background of whatever the fuck you're doing, because it is maybe the only movie that's portraying Muslims in a positive light available on Netflix, or maybe available on I don't know how many digital platforms. In terms of a feature film. We don't have that much stuff out there. Like Linda was saying, we don't see ourselves and stuff. And so it was really, important for me and for all the comedians in the movie to be able to tell our own stories. And so the way the movie has been received has been, I get emails from 16-year-old girls who are like, I'm Filipino and I live in Iowa and your movie meant something to me, which I didn't which is great because I also feel a little I'm also a 16-year-old Filipino girl in Iowa. You know what I mean? We're all 16-year-old Filipino girls in Iowa. Do you know what I mean? Just the way we're all also, Syrian refugees and whatever. We're rejected. And so that has been really lovely to be able to make that connection with those people. Also 43-year-old white guys in Canada have also said the same. And I say to them, you are also a 16-year-old Filipino girl in Iowa. But the other thing that has come out of it is, I get death threats. Hey, by a round of applause, who in here gets death threats, right? Okay, they're fun. And the most recent one I got was to my parents' home phone, and they left a voicemail, which I thought was really nice. And but it was really boring. It was if your daughter keeps doing what she does, I'll kill her, I'll kill you all. It was just sort of cliche. I mean, I feel like if you're gonna leave a death threat, there should be some more innovations in that space. And it's funny to me because it at no point did it occur to me that it would be weird or that I would get a death threat. I'm 5'4" and I dress like a cartoon character. So why does anyone waste their time? You know what I'm saying? Anyways, what is the question? Okay, let me see if I can. But I will say the interesting thing about how this movie has come out is that then the fight sort of, you realize, never ends. We're kind of stuck doing this shit, right? Until there's peace on Earth, right? That's the weird thing. It's endless. And one of those moments is there was a bunch of hate campaigns and in a particular hate group that put up a bunch of Muslim posters throughout the New York City subway system and as well as San Francisco and Philadelphia, and they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that they were just these ugly posters about Muslims. And so me and my co-producer Dino Vidala from the movie thought I called him up and I said, hey, if they're gonna do these kind of anti-Muslim posters, why don't we do a delightful Muslim campaign? We'll promote the movie. It'll be, fighting bigotry with delightful posters. We worked with the MTA for 5 months to do this. They approved all the posters. We were ready to go. On the day they were supposed to go up, they didn't go up. We were like, oh, well, it just takes a while. It's fine, though. Everything's fine. 2 days later, we get a call from the lawyers who were unpleasant. And they said, we decided that to ban this kind of poster, it represents political speech, and we're banning political speech. So we did what any, normal Muslim would do, and we launched the Fighting Bigotry with Delightful Lawsuits campaign. And we sued the MTA, and because it's totally uncool. And the thing is, so we sued the MTA, and then here's the weird thing, we won. So a couple of dirtbag comedians took on the MTA, and the comedians won. That is, you know what I mean? And that's why Chuck Schumer warmed up the room for me today. He was my opening act. So my point is, however, that the work sort of never ends, and it takes on different dimensions. I'll shut up, and that's it.
So happy we've heard from all of our plenary speakers, and we've about 10 minutes left, and I want to open it up to a conversation between you. So what thoughts do you have for each other, or questions that you may have for each other?
I have a thought, actually. So I was saying earlier that we so much of language change is about it's for us to be able to see ourselves differently from the way that we're characterized by the mainstream story. And I think that one of the things I learned when I was first learning about shifting stories and narratives is there's this really freaky idea, it's freaky to me, that when a person is really deeply engaged in a story, like they're watching a movie or they're reading a book and they're really deeply engaged, their brain takes them physiologically through the reactions that the protagonist is having. So, like, you don't have to sit down and watch Beaches and think, oh, I want to cry like Bette Midler, you know, I want to be like Bette Midler. You are just going to cry at the end of Beaches if the story has been told well. And I think that's, there's something about getting the body, people's bodies involved. I think that's what's so hugely important about what you do, Negin, because, and Linda, you too, because you make people laugh. And then once we're laughing, our bodies are involved, and it's involuntary. The person doesn't have to be like, oh yes, I want to watch this film about these Muslim comics and feel sympathy for them as they try to bring delight around the country and get a bunch of hatred back. They are going to feel that anyway. So to me, that's a huge argument for adding great storytelling and great framing to our skill set, to our toolbox. You know, I think a lot of the people in this room, old colleagues of mine, we're organizers, we're researchers, and we're really good with the data, but the data isn't gonna save us here. What is gonna save us is our truth in another form, and that is in the form of our stories, other people's stories, but in the form of stories where there are characters and things happen, there are plots, and that, because that's gonna, it gives us a new, I can't use weapons language. It gives us another tool in our toolkit for helping people get to the places we need them to get to, which is seeing immigrants as part of the racial justice trajectory of this country and as part of this country.
I just wanted to say, so many artists know that the people in this room value arts and culture, but I think connecting the dots and also that word tool, that artists tend to feel sometimes like they're just a tool for a certain agenda. So, you know, how do we get past that in terms of creative strategies?
Yeah, well, Jose was kind of talking about that before. Like, I've been on so many of these shows, not to brag, but like I've been on, you know, like the MSNBCs and CNNs or whatever. Some tragic thing happens, roll the Muslim girl out, like, you know, whatever. Although I'm a comedian, so it's sort of like, why are you rolling me out? I don't know. Anyway, and I always say to them, like, I was formerly a policy analyst, and I am like, I have a lot of credibility in the campaign finance space, and you know, and I have the degrees and I have all of that stuff. Bring me on. I will, you know, talk the pants out of Citizens United. Bring me on, and they will. And I've begged, but nope. They only bring me on when there's a Muslim thing, you know. And so that's part of it, is like seeing you know. One of the things that I did, that's a movie I have coming out in April. It's called Third Street Blackout, and it's just a romantic comedy set in the blackout after Hurricane Sandy, and it just so happens to star an Iranian American Muslim female, which is me, and it's not, and you know that she's Muslim, you know she's Iranian, you might hear her speak Farsi, but it's not a big deal. It's not the focus of the movie. It's a romantic comedy at the end of the day, and I think we can start sort of, you know, interjecting like some brown into these things.
New norms.
I just wanted to add that sometimes when we think that we're on national media or we're you know, doing these videos and trying to put out communications, like thinking about who we're talking to. I'm actually not talking to my opposition, and it may seem like I am. I'm talking to young people, and the reason why I see that we have a responsibility when I see young dreamers that put themselves out there and go on national television or are standing at these big rallies. There are people who watch us in our communities. There are people that we're trying to give courage to, that we're trying to say it's okay to get up and speak out. So when I'm on national television, I want young Muslim women, young immigrant women, or children of immigrants to see me and say, hey, if she can do that, I can do that. If she can be up there and proud and she can speak the truth, I can do that. So the audience that I'm speaking to is a different audience than what people think we're speaking to. I'm not trying to speak to, quote, mainstream America. I am mainstream America. So when we're out there, think about who your audience is, right? We make it seem like my mom watches MSNBC too. Like my parents watch CNN. My parents are watching, local news channels. My parents are on Facebook, right? Like they watch videos on Facebook too. So this idea that when we're on national media that we're trying to convince some other people, yeah, you know what, they might be in the bunch and they might be like, oh, I can understand what she's saying. But really we're talking to our own people. It is our way to get a mass message out to our own people to say, the time is now for us to stand up for our own communities, because if we don't stand up for our own communities, no one's gonna stand up for us. And that's why we need to think about the media, not us tools for the media, but the media is my tool, my tool to get my message out there to the masses and make sure that at least some of us are out there speaking the truth, and at least some of us are humanizing our communities and not making us into dollar signs or other types of more tangible benefits. Thank you.
So, thank you. So on that note of I am mainstream America, we want to thank all of our plenary speakers today. We want to encourage you to attend the Arts and Culture track. You can connect with more artists, organizers, more media people, more cultural organizers. Again, thank you so much to Nick, Culture Strike, and our guests.